Street girl saves a millionaire, passed out in the landfill. What happens next is shocking. She just wanted to survive, but ended up changing the destiny of a powerful man. The rescue turned into persecution, and her life became worth even less than before. But in the end, it was the girl's courage that unmasked the truth everyone feared. If this story interested you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and tell us what city you're watching from. Let's continue. I promise this will be the best story you'll ever hear in your life. The sun was setting slowly over the sanitary landfill on the outskirts of Chicago, tinting the sky with an ashen orange that blended with the smoke from small, spontaneous fires among the piles of garbage. Lily, with her barely completed 16 years and dark eyes that carried the hardness of someone who knew the cruelties of the world too early, rummaged skillfully among torn bags and discarded objects. Her thin fingers, calloused from constant work, moved with the precision of a pianist, quickly separating what could be sold or traded. The girl knew every corner of that place like one knows the map of their own scars. She knew where to find more valuable metals, where trucks dumped trash from rich neighborhoods, and most importantly, she knew escape routes in case something went wrong. And in that place, something always went wrong. She was about to end her day when an unusual metallic reflection caught her attention. Pushing aside some styrofoam plates, Lily came face to face with something that didn't belong in that scenario. A man in a suit, unconscious, with a dirty face and a deep cut on his forehead that still let a thread of blood escape. His breathing was weak, almost imperceptible. For a moment she thought about ignoring it. People like her learned early that involvement meant trouble, but there was something different there. The man didn't look like just any drunk who had passed out. The suit, even dirty and torn, was of a quality she had never touched. That was when she realized they weren't alone. At the top of the garbage mound, two hooded men were silently watching. When their gazes met, Lily felt the danger like an animal senses a predator. In an instant, her thin body was already slipping between the mounds of garbage, activating an instinctive knowledge of the landfill's secret passages. "Shit, shit, shit," she repeated as she ran, jumping over dark puddles of leachate and sliding through narrow passages where only someone with her thin body could pass. The men followed her, but she knew the territory much better. She zigzagged between abandoned containers, crossed a fetid stream, climbed a pile of old tires, and finally reached an opening in the fence that separated the landfill from the neighboring district. Her heart was beating like a hammer against her chest as she ran through the narrow streets of the community. She needed help but couldn't trust anyone. The police station was out of the question. Street girls and cops rarely mixed well. It was then that she spotted the community health center, still open at that hour. She entered breathlessly, ignoring the curious looks in the waiting room. "There's an injured man in the landfill near the north entrance. Looks serious," she quickly informed the receptionist, who barely had time to ask her name before Lily disappeared again through the door. Outside, hidden in the shadows of an alley, she observed the commotion. She saw when the ambulance arrived, when the paramedics returned carrying a stretcher, when the man was taken away. Something inside her, a curiosity she couldn't explain, made her follow the ambulance to the nearest hospital. At St. Anthony Municipal Hospital, the buzz was intense. Nurses and doctors circulated hurriedly while commenting on the businessman found in the landfill. Lily, who had slipped in unnoticed, caught fragments of conversations in the corridors. "It's him. Richard Mitchell, CEO of Mitchell Developments. How did a man like that end up in a sanitary landfill? They've already contacted the police and the family." The following days were strange for Lily. For the first time in years, she couldn't focus solely on daily survival. She returned to the hospital, hidden among visitors, to catch news about the man she had saved. She discovered he was stable but unconscious, that the press speculated about a possible kidnapping or attempted corporate takeover, that his fortune was estimated in billions. On the fourth day, when she was already beginning to lose interest and return to her routine, she heard a nurse comment that Richard Mitchell had awakened but suffered from partial amnesia. He didn't remember how he had ended up in the landfill, nor who had attacked him. It was the following week, when she had almost forgotten the incident, that Lily realized she was being followed. A black car, discreet but evidently expensive, was circling slowly around the landfill. Her first instinct was to run, but something made her wait. The driver got out, a tall, middle-aged man with a serious but not threatening countenance. "Are you Lily?" he asked directly. "How do you know my name?" she retorted, already calculating escape routes. "They described the girl who reported an injured man in the landfill. It wasn't hard to find you. Mr. Mitchell would like to speak with you." Distrust was her second nature. "Why?" "I didn't do anything." The man smiled slightly. "You saved his life. And he's a man who doesn't like to leave debts unpaid." Against all her instincts, Lily agreed to get in the car. Maybe it was curiosity, maybe it was hunger, maybe it was simply the fatigue of fighting alone every day. During the journey, she carefully observed each detail, memorizing the way in case she needed to return alone or escape. The car stopped in front of a private hospital in the south side of the city, an imposing building that looked more like a luxury hotel. She was led through silent and impeccably clean corridors to a private suite on the top floor. Seated in an armchair near the window, Richard Mitchell looked very different from the man she had found in the landfill. There was still paleness in his face, and a discreet bandage covered part of his forehead, but his posture was that of someone accustomed to command. His eyes, however, when they turned to her, had an expression Lily didn't expect: kindness. "So you're my guardian angel," he said with a slight smile. Lily remained silent, suspicious. "Please, sit down. I'd like to talk to you." "I don't need a reward," Lily anticipated, still standing. "Anyone would have done the same." Richard shook his head. "We both know that's not true. And no, I'm not talking about money. I want to understand what happened. There are parts I can't remember." Slowly, Lily approached and sat on the edge of a chair. She told him what she had seen, the men at the top of the mound, how she had fled and sought help. Richard listened attentively, asking few questions. "You saved my life by risking your own," he concluded when she finished. "That creates a bond, whether you want it or not." "I don't want anything from you," Lily insisted, now genuinely uncomfortable. "What if I said I need your help?" asked Richard, leaning slightly forward. "Someone tried to remove me from the picture, and you might be the only person who saw something that could help me discover who it was." Lily swallowed hard. Getting involved in a millionaire's problems was the last thing she planned, but there was something in the way he spoke, direct, without condescension, that intrigued her. "What exactly do you want from me?" she finally asked. "To start, a safe place to stay while you help me reconstruct what happened," Richard replied. "I have a house on the outskirts of the city. You would have your own space, food, everything you need. No commitments, no obligations. When you want to leave, you can go." The proposal was too tempting for someone who slept between cardboard boxes. Still, Lily hesitated. Trust was not something she easily distributed. "I can leave whenever I want. No questions, my word," Richard replied, extending his hand. Richard Mitchell's mansion was located in a gated community on the outskirts of Chicago, surrounded by an extensive green area that isolated it from the outside world. For Lily, who had never seen anything like it, the place seemed unreal, like those soap opera settings she occasionally watched in electronics store windows. The car stopped in front of a modern building, all glass and concrete with straight minimalist lines that contrasted with the lush vegetation around it. A middle-aged woman, with a serious but not hostile expression, received them at the door. "This is Mrs. Helen, the housekeeper," Richard introduced. "She'll show you your room and explain how everything works." Lily followed the woman through wide corridors, decorated with abstract artworks and furniture that seemed never to have been used. They arrived at a suite on the second floor, larger than any place she had ever slept in. "Mr. Richard had clothes and personal items prepared for you," explained Mrs. Helen, indicating a closet. "Dinner will be served at 8. Do you need anything else?" Lily shook her head, unable to formulate any request. When the woman left, she locked the door and immediately checked the windows, her mind already calculating escape routes, as she instinctively did in any new place. Despite the luxury and comfort, she felt like a caged animal. She took a long shower, something she hadn't done for so long that she couldn't remember the last time. She examined the new clothes with suspicion, but ended up wearing a simple set of jeans and a blouse. Everything was exactly her size. She went down for dinner punctually, following the aroma of food that filled the house. Richard was waiting for her in the dining room, standing next to the elaborately set table. "I hope you're comfortable," he said, indicating a chair. "It's strange," replied Lily, sitting stiffly. "Why are you doing this? Gratitude doesn't justify all this." She gestured around. "Extravagance." Richard served himself wine before answering. You saved me when you had no reason to do so. That's rare, Lily. People who act without expecting something in return are practically extinct in my world. Don't put me on a pedestal, she warned. You don't know me. That's exactly why we're here, he smiled. To get to know each other. Dinner proceeded in an uncomfortable silence, broken only by occasional questions from Richard about her life. Lily responded with monosyllables or half-truths, protection habits difficult to abandon. After the meal, Richard led her to his office, a spacious room with walls full of books and a large solid wood desk. I need you to tell me everything again, he asked, indicating a comfortable sofa. Every detail of what you saw in the landfill. It may seem insignificant to you, but anything could help fill the gaps in my memory. Lily repeated the story, this time with more details. She described the men who were watching them, one taller, the other more corpulent, both dressed in black. She mentioned that one of them seemed to limp slightly when moving. She talked about the metallic reflection she had seen in one of their pockets, possibly a weapon. Richard listened attentively, making occasional notes. You have perceptive eyes, he commented, impressed with the richness of details. On the street, observing is surviving, she replied, shrugging. At the end of the conversation, Richard seemed thoughtful. I believe it wasn't a common assault. Someone wanted to silence me, and it's related to a project I'm developing. But I need more time to connect the pieces. When Lily stood up to return to her room, he added, Please, stay for a few days. I know you don't trust me yet, and you have every right to be suspicious, but I promise you're safe here. That night, Lily couldn't sleep. The bed was too soft, the deep silence of the gated community. Everything seemed wrong for someone accustomed to the constant noise of the streets. Around 3 in the morning, she decided to explore the house. She descended the stairs silently, her bare feet making no sound on the wooden steps. The house was dark, illuminated only by the moonlight entering through the large windows. She toured the ground floor, familiarizing herself with the rooms, identifying exits, memorizing the layout. It was when she reached the back veranda that she saw Richard. He was sitting on the floor, leaning against a column, staring fixedly at the dark garden. There was something so vulnerable in that posture that Lily hesitated, feeling as if she were invading a deeply intimate moment. She was about to retreat when he spoke without turning around. Can't sleep either. Lily froze, surprised to have been noticed. How did you know it was me? I didn't, he replied, still without looking back. But I hoped it was. Hesitantly, Lily approached and sat a few meters away. They remained in silence for several minutes, observing the shadows of the garden. I thought you would try to escape tonight, Richard finally commented. I still could, she replied, defiant. He finally turned his face to her, and in the half-light, Lily could see that his eyes were red, as if he had been crying. You could indeed. The doors aren't locked. They never will be for you. Something in that sincere vulnerability disarmed her. Why are you so downcast? I thought millionaires didn't have problems. Richard laughed, a bitter and broken sound. We all have our abysses, Lily. Mine are just decorated with expensive wallpaper. For the first time since she arrived, Lily felt she was seeing the real man behind the powerful businessman facade. Want to talk about it? Richard hesitated, as if deciding how much he could reveal. I lost my wife 2 years ago. Cancer. Since then, I've immersed myself in work until I almost drowned in it. The company grew, the fortune too. But the house remains empty. Lily didn't know how to respond. Comfort wasn't something she knew how to offer. I'm sorry, she finally said, the words sounding inadequate even to her own ears. That's why this attack scares me more than it should, continued Richard. It's not fear of losing money or power. It's that I have nothing else beyond that. That confession of loneliness, coming from someone who seemed to have everything, touched Lily in a way she didn't expect. She recognized in him a different form of the same emptiness she carried. I'll stay, she said suddenly, for now. Richard looked at her, surprised. Why? Lily shrugged, uncomfortable with her own decision. Because you seem to need help, and I don't have anything better to do. A small smile appeared on his face. It's the most honest start to a friendship I've ever had. The following days established a cautious routine between them. Lily gradually got used to the house, although she always kept her few belongings organized, ready to leave if necessary. Richard spent part of the day in his home office, where he conducted video conferences and took calls. In the intervals, they talked. He told her about Mitchell Developments, the company he had inherited from his father, and expanded to make it one of the largest construction companies in the country. He talked about a new project he was developing, a plan for affordable housing that would use sustainable techniques and recyclable materials. "It's more than a business," he explained with genuine enthusiasm. "It could transform the lives of entire communities, create a new model of urban development." Lily listened with growing interest. There was a passion in him when he talked about this project that contrasted with the downcast figure she had seen on the veranda. "But there are powerful people against it," continued Richard, his expression darkening. "Traditional construction companies, politicians with interests in real estate speculation, and my partner, Frank Adams, has been acting strangely lately." "You think your partner might be involved in what happened to you?" asked Lily. Richard ran his hand through his hair, a gesture she had noticed was characteristic when he was tense. "I don't know. Frank helped me when the company almost went bankrupt after Claire's death, my wife. We were friends in college, and he appeared as a savior at that moment. But now..." "Now you suspect him," completed Lily. "I'm afraid I'm becoming paranoid," admitted Richard. "Losing Claire left me broken in a way that might not be fixable." That conversation marked a change in the relationship between them. The initial distrust was beginning to give way to a mutual understanding, a recognition that despite the abysmal differences in their lives, both carried deep wounds. One afternoon, while Lily was organizing some books in the library at Mrs. Helen's request, the intercom rang. She heard voices at the entrance, and moments later Richard appeared at the library door accompanied by an elegant man with perfectly combed grey hair and a confident smile. "Lily, this is Frank Adams, my partner," introduced Richard. "Frank, this is Lily, my..." He hesitated briefly. "Guest." Frank extended his hand with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Enchanted, Lily." Richard mentioned he had a guest but didn't say she was so young and pretty. Lily shook his hand reluctantly, feeling an immediate discomfort. There was something calculating in that gaze, a cold assessment that she knew well from the streets, the look of someone who is always looking for advantages. "Frank came to discuss the latest details of the New Horizons project," explained Richard. "We'll be in the office if you need anything." When the men left, Lily remained motionless for a few moments, processing the uncomfortable sensation that Frank had caused her. And then, in an impulse she couldn't explain, she silently approached the office door. Lily approached the office door with silent steps, a skill perfected in the streets where passing unnoticed was a matter of survival. The door was ajar, allowing fragments of the conversation to escape into the hallway. "Need to be more careful, Richard," Frank was saying in a restrained tone. "The board is restless. This social project of yours can wait." "It's not just a social project," Richard retorted, his voice firm. "It's the future of the company. Sustainable technology, affordable housing, social responsibility. It's where the market is heading." "The market goes where we lead it," Frank replied with a dry laugh, "and there are old commitments that need to be honored first." Lily heard the sound of footsteps approaching the door and quickly moved away, pretending to be busy organizing a nearby shelf. Frank emerged from the office, followed by Richard. "Consider what we discussed," said Frank, placing his hand on Richard's shoulder in a gesture that seemed friendly, but which Lily perceived as subtly possessive. "And be careful. Your fall may not have been an isolated incident." When Frank was gone, a heavy silence settled in the house. Richard remained motionless in the hall, as if absorbing the implications of that visit. "You don't trust him," observed Lily, approaching cautiously. Richard looked at her, surprised by her insight. "Less and less," he admitted. "But I have no proof of anything, just intuition." "On the street I learned to trust intuition," commented Lily. "It's the first alert system we have." A tired smile appeared on Richard's face. "In the corporate world, we learn to ignore it in favor of spreadsheets and risk analyses. Maybe that's why I'm in this situation now." The next morning, Lily found Richard in the office, surrounded by folders and documents spread over the desk. "I'm reviewing all contracts and transactions from the last 2 years, he explained upon noticing her presence. "If Frank is plotting something, there must be traces somewhere." "I can help," offered Lily, surprising herself. I know how to read contracts. I worked a few months as an office girl in a law firm before—" She hesitated. "Before everything collapsed." Richard looked at her with renewed curiosity, as if recalculating something about her. "There's a lot about you I don't know, isn't there?" Lily shrugged, uncomfortable with the attention. "Everyone has a past." "Well, I'll be grateful for the help," said Richard, indicating a pile of folders. "Look for anything unusual, payments that don't make sense, names that appear repeatedly, dates that don't match." Over the following days, Lily immersed herself in the documents with a dedication that surprised Richard. Her sharp mind and attention to detail proved valuable as they scoured the company's financial history. "I found something strange," she said one afternoon, pointing to a spreadsheet. "These transfers to a company called Atlantic Consulting. They appear monthly, significant amounts, but there's no detailing of services provided." Richard examined the documents with a furrowed brow. "I never authorized these payments, and the name isn't familiar to me." They continued investigating and discovered that Atlantic was just a front, which in turn directed the resources to other offshore companies. The pattern revealed a sophisticated money diversion scheme. "Frank has authorization to approve transfers up to a certain amount," murmured Richard, connecting the pieces. "He could have been doing this for months without my noticing. Especially after Claire fell ill and I partially stepped away from the operation." Richard's face assumed an expression that Lily had not yet seen, a mixture of anger and determination that completely transformed his usually gentle physiognomy. "We need more evidence," he said, closing a file forcefully. "Something that directly connects Frank to this." It was on a rainy night, while Richard was in a video conference, that Lily decided to take a risky step. Taking advantage of Mrs. Helen having gone to visit her daughter, she entered the office and began to look in places they hadn't yet investigated. Behind a row of books on the shelf, she found a hidden compartment. Inside, a folder with old documents, photos of Richard with businessmen that Lily recognized from news about corruption scandals, contracts with clauses underlined in red, and something even more alarming, a small electronic device that seemed to be a bug. She was absorbed in the discovery when she heard a subtle noise, the almost imperceptible sound of footsteps in the hallway. She quickly put everything back in place and hid behind a heavy curtain. The office door opened and Frank entered, accompanied by a man Lily had never seen. Tall, stocky, with a slight limp in his right leg. She immediately recognized him as one of the men she had seen in the landfill. "The security system will be deactivated for 40 minutes, Frank was saying. "Enough time to access the safe and the main server." "What about the girl?" asked the other man. "She saw my face at the landfill. She's a risk." "I'll take care of her," Frank replied coldly. "Richard has created a bond with her. We can use that to our advantage." The men continued talking in low voices, checking something on Richard's computer before leaving. Lily remained motionless for several minutes, her heart hammering in her chest, making sure they had really left. When she finally came out of hiding, she ran to find Richard. She found him in his room, finishing the video conference. "We need to talk," she said, breathless. Now, Richard immediately perceived the urgency in her voice and ended the call. Lily reported everything she had seen and heard, the words coming out in anxious bursts. "I'm absolutely certain," she concluded. "It's the same man from the landfill. Frank is behind all this." Richard was silent for a few moments, processing the information. "That would explain a lot," he finally said. "The timing of the accident, his strange behavior, the pressures for me to postpone the New Horizons project. They mentioned a safe and a server," Lily remembered. "What do you keep there?" "Original contracts, backups of confidential data, patent prototypes." Richard suddenly paled. "The complete New Horizons project is there. If Frank gets the technical specifications before the patents are registered, he can steal it or completely sabotage it." Lily observed Richard's expression transform from shock to determination. "We need to act quickly," he decided, standing up. "I'll contact the head of security and my trusted lawyer. We have to document all of this." "What about me?" asked Lily, unsure about her role in that situation that seemed increasingly dangerous. Richard looked at her with an intensity that made her take a step back. "You've already done more than enough, Lily. I put you in danger without realizing it. The best would be for you to stay in a safe place until we resolve this." "No," she responded firmly. "I won't run away. I've been involved in this since the landfill, remember?" A mixture of concern and admiration passed over Richard's face. "Are you sure?" Frank is dangerous, and now we know he has people working for him who didn't hesitate to try to hurt me." "I am," affirmed Lily. She was surprised by her own determination, by how much she cared about the outcome of that story, which just a few weeks ago had nothing to do with her. In the days that followed, they elaborated a careful plan. Richard wouldn't confront Frank directly until he gathered sufficient evidence. With the help of digital security specialists, they began to monitor Frank's communications and strengthen the protections around the company's data. Lily began to accompany Richard to some company meetings, officially presented as his assistant. Her presence at the headquarters of Mitchell Developments caused curiosity among the employees, but Richard seemed immune to the comments. It was during one of these visits that Frank approached Lily directly, finding her alone in the hallway while she waited for Richard to finish a meeting. "You and Richard seem to have developed an interesting relationship," he commented, subtly blocking her path. Lily maintained a neutral expression, although her body was on maximum alert. "He has been kind." Frank smiled, a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Richard always had a soft heart, especially after Claire died, so emotionally fragile. He made a studied pause. "You know, Lily, people like you and me understand how the world really works. We're pragmatic." "I don't know what you're talking about," she replied coldly. "Of course you do." Frank moved a little closer. "You grew up on the streets, learned to survive. You know that sentimentalism doesn't fill the stomach. What is Richard offering you? A temporary roof? I could offer much more." "I'm not interested in offers," Lily cut him off, trying to pass by him. Frank held her arm with enough force to leave marks. "Think carefully, girl. Richard is an idealist who lives in a fantasy world. I built this company as much as he did. I know how to ensure that people like you stay comfortable, permanently." Lily pulled her arm, freeing herself. "People like me recognize a threat when they hear one," she retorted, her eyes sparkling. "And they know that empty promises are just that, empty." Frank's expression hardened. "A pity. It could have been simpler." He adjusted his jacket in a studied gesture and added, "Tell Richard I'm looking forward to the board meeting next week. It will be revealing." When Frank walked away, Lily realized her hands were shaking. The barely veiled threat confirmed her suspicions. Frank was planning some decisive move, and soon. When she reported the encounter to Richard, she saw the concern deepen in his face. "The board meeting," he murmured. "Of course, he's going to try to remove me from the presidency, probably alleging emotional instability or mismanagement." "Can he do that?" asked Lily, alarmed. "With the right evidence and enough support, yes," confirmed Richard, "especially if he has manipulated financial data to show that the company is losing money under my leadership." That night, while they were discussing strategies, Richard's phone rang. The call lasted less than a minute, but was enough to drain all color from his face. "What happened?" asked Lily, alarmed. Frank accelerated the schedule. Richard responded, his voice tense. "The board meeting has been moved up to tomorrow. Someone leaked information about our investigation." A heavy silence fell over them. Time was running out. "There's one more thing I haven't told you," Richard finally said. "Something that not even Frank knows exists." He went to a bookshelf and pressed a specific sequence of spines, revealing a secret compartment. From inside, he retrieved a small storage device. "What is that?" asked Lily. "Insurance," replied Richard. "Evidence I've been collecting for months about suspicious activities in the company. Initially, I didn't know Frank was involved, but now it all makes sense." Lily's eyes widened as she realized the implications. "You suspected something was wrong for a long time." Richard nodded. "Claire was an auditor. Before she fell ill, she mentioned discrepancies she had noticed in the company's accounts. After she..." His voice faltered briefly. "After she was gone, I continued investigating discreetly." Lily felt a wave of admiration for Richard. There was more strength in him than appeared. "And now?" she asked. "Now," said Richard, carefully storing the device, "we prepare our defense and counterattack." While finalizing preparations for the imminent confrontation, Lily couldn't help but reflect on the strange journey that had brought her there. From solitary survival in the landfill to being at the center of a high-level corporate dispute, life had taken a turn she could never have predicted. Even more surprising was realizing that, for the first time in years, she felt part of something bigger than her own survival. There was a purpose in her actions, a connection that transcended self-interest. Richard seemed to notice her contemplation. "What are you thinking about?" he asked gently. Lily hesitated, unaccustomed to expressing feelings about how strange it is to care. A comprehending smile appeared on his face. Sometimes the hardest thing isn't surviving, but remembering why it's worth living. Those words reverberated inside her like a long-forgotten truth. And that night, as they prepared to face Frank, Lily realized she wasn't just fighting for Richard's future or the company's, but also for her own, a future that for the first time she dared to imagine. The morning of the board meeting dawned with a sky heavy with grey clouds that promised an imminent storm. Lily watched from the car window as they headed toward the headquarters of Mitchell Developments, an imposing glass and steel building in Chicago's financial center. "Nervous?" asked Richard, noticing how she drummed her fingers on her knee. "I'm not used to battles that don't involve running or hiding," admitted Lily, "but I'm ready." Richard nodded, his eyes reflecting a serene determination. "Remember the plan. No matter what happens in there, keep calm. Frank will try to provoke, destabilize, create confusion. That's how he operates." When they arrived at the corporate parking lot, Richard received a call from the head of security. After a brief conversation, he hung up with a grave expression. "What is it?" asked Lily, alarmed. "They detected suspicious activity on the company's servers during the night. Someone tried to access the New Horizons project files." "Frank?" suggested Lily. "Probably," agreed Richard. "But our security team was prepared. They implemented the protocol we discussed. Frank thinks he got what he wanted, but in fact, he only obtained modified files." They entered the building through the director's private access. In the elevator, Richard received another message that made him smile slightly. "Good news?" asked Lily. "The best," he replied. "We just received confirmation that the Atlantic consulting transactions were traced to accounts in tax havens. And guess whose accounts those are?" The executive floor was in full activity when they arrived. Secretaries and assistants moved hurriedly, preparing the meeting room for the board meeting. Frank was already present, animatedly conversing with two older board members. When he spotted Richard and Lily, his confident smile faltered for an instant. "Richard, I thought you would come alone. Board matters are confidential, as you know." "Lily has my complete trust," Richard responded calmly, "and she has relevant information for this meeting." Frank cast a calculating look at Lily before responding. "As you wish. After all, this might be your last decision as president." As the other board members arrived, Lily noticed the power dynamic in the room. Some greeted Richard warmly, others kept their distance, clearly aligned with Frank. The climate was one of contained tension, expectation. When everyone was present, 12 board members around the large marble table, Frank took the initiative. "Ladies and gentlemen of the board, I requested this extraordinary meeting because we have a serious situation on our hands," he began, his voice projected to convey concern. "In recent months, Mitchell Developments has faced questionable decisions that put the future of the company at risk." With theatrical gestures, Frank presented graphs and financial projections that showed a supposed drop in profitability, attributing it directly to Richard's initiatives. "The so-called New Horizons project," continued Frank, pronouncing the name with disdain, "is a resource sink that compromises our position in the market, and that's just the tip of the iceberg." With a triumphant look at Richard, Frank proceeded, "I have evidence of serious administrative irregularities that call into question our president's ability to continue leading this company." A murmur ran through the room. Richard remained impassive, his face a mask of serenity that impressed Lily. "Furthermore," added Frank, subtly pointing to Lily, "we have to question certain recent associations that suggest compromised judgment." When Frank finished his exposition, the silence in the room was palpable. All eyes turned to Richard, who rose slowly. "I thank Board Member Adams for his concern for the company," Richard began, his calm voice contrasting with Frank's vehemence. "Indeed, we have serious issues to discuss today, but they are not the ones that were presented." With a gesture to his assistant, Richard had a new set of graphs and data projected. "These are the company's real numbers for the last 2 quarters, he explained. "As you can see, we are not only stable but in consistent growth. The New Horizons project, far from being a resource sink, has already attracted 3 international investors interested in our sustainable technology." Richard paused, scanning each face around the table. "As for the supposed administrative irregularities, I have something more concerning to show." With another signal, new documents were projected, bank transfers, contracts with forged signatures, compromising emails. In the last 2 years, continued Richard, his voice now firmer, our company has been the victim of a sophisticated resource diversion scheme. Millions of dollars were diverted through shell companies like Atlantic Consulting. Frank's face visibly paled. This is absurd. You're trying to divert attention from your own failures. The curious thing, continued Richard, ignoring the interruption, is that all these transfers were approved with authorization codes that only 2 executives possess, myself and board member Adams. And as you can verify from the access records, I was hospitalized when several of these transactions occurred. A sepulchral silence fell over the room. Frank rose abruptly. This is a farce, a desperate attempt to— I'm not finished yet, interrupted Richard, his voice cutting through the air like a blade. 2 weeks ago, I was found seriously injured in a sanitary landfill. What seemed like an accident, we now know was a deliberate attempt to silence me. At this point, Richard made a gesture to Lily, who stood up and approached the table. This is Lily Carter, introduced Richard. It was she who found me and saved my life, and it was she who identified one of the men involved in the attack, a man who works directly for board member Adams. Lily took a step forward, feeling the weight of all gazes upon her. With a firm voice, she reported what she had seen in the landfill, Frank's visit to Richard's house, the conversation she had overheard between Frank and the man she had recognized from the landfill. Frank, who seemed increasingly agitated, tried to interrupt several times, but the board members silenced him, absorbing the revelations with expressions that varied from shock to indignation. This is ridiculous, Frank finally exploded. You're going to believe the word of a street girl over mine? This is a conspiracy. It's not just her word, Richard responded calmly. We have security recordings, access records, bank transactions, and more importantly, we have this. Richard then displayed the small storage device he had shown Lily the night before. This drive contains recordings of the last 5 private meetings I had with board member Adams, including one in which he explicitly admits having manipulated financial data to pressure the board against the New Horizons project. Frank's face transformed into a mask of fury. In a sudden movement, he grabbed his briefcase and headed for the door. I won't participate in this farce. My lawyers will be in touch. I don't think you're going anywhere, Frank. The new voice belonged to a man who had just entered the room, tall with a serious appearance, accompanied by 2 uniformed police officers. This is Detective Montgomery from the FBI, introduced Richard. He's investigating a money laundering scheme that, coincidentally, involves companies linked to our esteemed board member. Frank looked like a cornered animal, his eyes jumping from one face to another, seeking an exit that didn't exist. Frank Adams, pronounced the detective formally, you are detained for investigation on suspicion of financial fraud, attempted homicide, and criminal conspiracy. What followed was a whirlwind of events. Frank was escorted out, vehemently protesting. The board meeting transformed into a crisis session, with Richard taking control and explaining in detail the plan to stabilize the company after the scandal. Lily observed everything with a sense of unreality. Hours before, she had been in Richard's mansion, worried about the confrontation. Now she was at the epicenter of an operation that seemed straight out of a movie. When they finally left the building, it was already night. The rain that had threatened all day was finally falling, washing the streets and creating a silver curtain around the light poles. We did it, said Richard when they got into the car. There was exhaustion in his voice, but also relief and a note of contained triumph. It was amazing, replied Lily, still processing everything that had happened. The look on his face when the police entered. Richard smiled, the first genuine smile she had seen in days. Frank always underestimated people. He thought I was too broken after losing Claire to react. He thought you were just an unimportant street girl. That was his biggest mistake. On the way back, Richard received several calls, board members, investors, all wanting assurances that the situation was under control. He responded with calm and confidence, as if the weight of the company wasn't a burden, but something he had finally fully accepted. When they arrived at the mansion, the storm had intensified. They ran from the garage to the entrance, arriving soaked but laughing like children. I think we deserve a celebration, said Richard, heading to the bar and serving 2 glasses of an amber liquid. He handed one to Lily. Apple juice. I hope you don't mind. I haven't drunk alcohol since Claire fell ill. Lily accepted the glass, strangely moved by the gesture. "To justice," she toasted. "To justice," agreed Richard, "and to new beginnings." Those words hung between them, loaded with meanings that neither was ready to fully explore. In the days that followed, life acquired a new rhythm. Richard immersed himself in the work of restructuring the company, implementing changes that had been blocked by Frank. The New Horizons project finally advanced to the execution phase, with the construction of the first sustainable housing complex scheduled to begin in 3 months. Lily, for her part, found herself in limbo. Richard's house had become an unlikely home, but she knew that situation was temporary. The danger had passed, the adventure had come to an end. It was time to move on. But to where? One Sunday afternoon, while Richard worked in the garden, a hobby he had recently rediscovered, Lily approached with the decision already made. "I need to talk to you," she said, sitting on the wooden bench near the rose bed he was cultivating. Richard looked up, noticing her serious expression. He took off his gardening gloves and sat beside her. "I'm listening." "I think it's time for me to leave," Lily said directly. "The danger is gone, you're safe, the company is recovering. There's no more reason for me to stay." Richard was silent for a moment, contemplating the roses in front of him. "And where would you go?" he finally asked. Lily shrugged, trying to appear more confident than she felt. "I have some contacts. I can find a place, a job." "Or," said Richard carefully, "you could stay." Lily turned to face him, surprised. "What do you mean?" "Simply that," he replied. "Stay. Not as my protégé or as someone to whom I owe a favor, but as part of this house." "Why?" asked Lily, genuinely confused. "I've done my part. The debt is paid." Richard sighed, running his hand through his hair in a gesture that she already recognized as characteristic when he was seeking the right words. "It's not about debt, Lily. It never was. You showed me something I had forgotten after losing Claire, that there is still kindness in the world, that it's still worth trusting, that life continues even after the most devastating losses." He paused, seeking her eyes. "Besides, you have a natural talent for business that would be a waste not to develop. The way you analyzed those contracts, how you noticed the inconsistencies. There's a trainee position at the company with your name on it if you want." Lily felt a lump in her throat. The offer was tempting, more than he could imagine. A real, legitimate chance to build something for herself. "What about your reputation?" she asked. "What will they say when they discover you're sheltering a street girl?" Richard smiled. "First, you're no longer a street girl. Second, since when do I care what they say? Third," his smile widened, "I've thought about that too." He removed an envelope from his pocket and handed it to her. Inside, Lily found official documents, legal guardianship forms. "I'm 16 years old," she murmured, perplexed. "You want to adopt me?" "I want to offer you what you should have had from the beginning, a family, a home, opportunities," Richard replied simply. "But only if that's what you want too. There's no pressure, no obligation. It's your choice, Lily." The tears that Lily had repressed for years, surviving on the streets, facing hunger and cold, fighting alone against an indifferent world, finally found their way. They rolled silently down her face as she held the documents as if they were something precious and fragile. "I don't know how to be anyone's daughter," she confessed, her voice choked. "I don't know how a normal family works," Richard laughed softly. "And I don't know how to be a father anymore. I never had the chance with Claire. I think we can learn together if you want to try." In that moment, looking at the man she had found broken in a garbage landfill, Lily felt something click inside her, like a piece that finally finds its place in a long, incomplete puzzle. "I want to try," she finally responded. A week later, Lily transferred her few possessions to a new room, not the guest room where she had been temporarily, but a space that Richard had reserved especially for her, painted in aqua tones and decorated with a desk, bookshelves, and a comfortable bed. "You can modify it however you want," he said. "This space is yours." The next day she started as a trainee at Mitchell Developments. At first, the curious looks and whispers bothered her, but soon her natural talent and dedication spoke louder. Within months, she was already coordinating a group of young apprentices recruited from the same underprivileged communities that would benefit from the New Horizons project. On a Saturday afternoon, almost a year after the meeting at the landfill, Lily was in the mansion's garden, now flourishing with the joint work of her and Richard, when the intercom announced a visitor. A young woman approximately her age, with delicate features and lively eyes, was led to the garden. "Amy!" exclaimed Lily, recognizing a former companion from her street days. The two embraced emotionally. Amy had been welcomed by a social program and was now studying on a full scholarship, dreaming of becoming a social worker. "I came to bring you this," said Amy, handing a small package. "I found it among my things and remembered you." It was a worn notebook, with yellowed pages covered with writings and drawings that Lily had made years before, when she still dreamed of studying architecture. "I thought I had lost it forever," murmured Lily, carefully leafing through the pages. "Some dreams just wait for the right moment to return," replied Amy with a smile. That night during dinner, Lily showed the notebook to Richard. "These drawings are extraordinary," he commented, examining the sketches of buildings and urban spaces she had created. "You never mentioned you had a talent for architecture." Lily shrugged, still unaccustomed to receiving compliments. "It was just a childhood fantasy, or maybe a calling," suggested Richard. "You know, the New Horizons project needs people who truly understand the needs of the communities we're going to serve. Someone who can translate those needs into functional and dignified spaces." Lily's eyes widened as she understood what he was suggesting. "You think I could?" "With the proper training, absolutely," affirmed Richard. "The company can sponsor your studies, and meanwhile, you could already work as a consultant on the project." In that moment, looking at the man who had become her family, and at the notebook that represented dreams she thought were lost, Lily felt a certainty she had never experienced before. The path ahead wouldn't be easy, but for the first time she wasn't alone to traverse it. The following week, she enrolled in a preparatory course for college entrance exams. In her free time, she worked on the first sketches for a community center that would be part of the New Horizons project. One morning, while working at the kitchen table, she found a note left by Richard alongside the breakfast. "You weren't saved. You saved yourself and brought me along." Lily smiled, carefully keeping the note. Of all the lessons she had learned in her journey from the landfill to here, perhaps the most important was this: that saving and being saved are not separate acts, but parts of the same cycle of renewal, like the roses in the garden that, after the harshest winter, always find strength to bloom again. The end of the story. Dear listeners, we hope that Lily and Richard's story has touched your hearts. To continue this emotional journey, we've prepared a special playlist with equally moving stories. Find it here, clicking on the left. If you liked this narrative of overcoming and new beginnings, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and give that like to the video. Every day we bring unique stories that explore the complexity of life and the bonds that unite us. Don't miss our upcoming content. We're eager to read your comments and know what touched you most in this story.